Hi everyone. In this video, we're going to create a React application, add a Polo client to it, and then try sending a GraphQL request to the node server we created. So the very first thing that I want to do here is, well, create my React application first. So I'm going to go outside one level and then run npx create React app. I'm going to call it web. As that's going through, one thing that I really don't like about Create React App, the default script, is that every time I reload it, and I'll show you what I mean. So if I do that and I go to web, let's open up a different, there we go. This should go back to API, and let's open up one here as well. Now, if you run yarn start, it will always automatically open up a window right here, like a browser window. I actually don't like that behavior, so what I'm going to do here is change the script to say do not open a browser, because in many cases I will already have a browser tab open for the React application. It's just a little annoying to have to close it over and over again. So that's just a tiny little thing that I like doing. The next thing that I need to do is add a few packages here. Apollo Boost, React Apollo, all of them are used for the Apollo client, and we also need GraphQL in our front end as well, and we're also going to add React Router. Very well. So let's get this started again. And we can actually visit here to quickly get started with React Router. I'm going to do a few things here before then. So look at index.js. A few things happening over here. It's also it's importing the index.css. There's the app.js. And I do want to clean this up a little bit. I don't need the logo. And remove that. Actually, I'm going to remove everything here. And just in case, or just so that it doesn't actually do anything weird, do that. Also remove that. Save it and see what happens in our browser. Localhost 3000. Hello world, as expected. Oops. And what else? What else am I doing here? I'm going to remove the app.css. I don't need that. Remove that. I don't need the logo. Remove that as well. Now, what else? I think that's about it. Is everything okay? Yep, everything seems fine. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do here is actually implement a very basic router. So let's see what I have here. I'm going to create pages called home and users. Now, this is one way that I like to set up my React application, the folder structure. Actually create a folder called pages. Ultimately, the files that I would create inside this pages folder will be React components, and I usually create another folder called components as well. Now, the idea behind this, and definitely you don't have to follow this at all, but to me, when you're creating like a small to medium sized application that may have like pretty well defined pages, and even if that's like a single page application, like pages, if you have if what you're trying to create has a pretty well defined kind of concept of different pages, I just find it mentally easier to understand when you create a separate folder with items inside of it that are each item, whether that may be a JavaScript file or another folder, each item inside that folder will be a single page, right? So that's the idea here. So I'm going to create a file called home.js. I'm also going to create a file called users.js. This is just to kind of get started. Inside home, what do I want to do? Let's see. Oops. Keep on doing that. My apologies. Yeah, let's grab a hold of that. Go back over here. Now, all this is doing is sending back a simple HTML. In our app.js, however, we will have to import our React router. Where is it? Oh, yeah, right here. And we also have to import our page component, like so. And we will render this. Now, if we want to have it so that, let's actually create our users page too. Copy that over, and this is just going to say users, right? Let's also import, can I do this? I can't. Import users from pages, users, and just copy this over here as well. Cool. So I save that and I go back to my browser. It says home, fantastic. If I go to users, it says users. Okay, let's add a very simple nav bar. So we're going to create a nav bar inside our components. So it's using React Router DOM's link component to create links. Okay, so that's all good. Now we're also going to navbar, yes. All right, let's auto import that, grab a hold of that. And inside the router, I am going to, no, actually, let's do this. We need something to wrap it around with, and this might actually give me an error saying that the navbar or link components should be inside the router components, I believe. Yep. You should not use link outside of, yeah, which is fair. Let's fix that. So let's grab a hold of that, do that, and refresh. Fantastic. Users, home, users, home. Okay, that's all I wanted to do. Cool. Excuse me. The next thing that I'm going to do is actually add a Polo client. A Polo client, the way you add it, their documentation is pretty good as well. So again, as you can see, these are the packages that you need to install. We've already done that. If you look over here, this is what you need to do. Import the Apollo client from here, and then actually initialize the client itself. Right. Now that is not the actual URL that we will use, because our URL is going to be localhost 4000 GraphQL, basically where this is. Right? So we can actually copy paste this over. Right? Same, but, and let's go back to our documentation here. Okay, and connecting your client to React. So then you need this. You go over here, and then you have to wrap everything around with a Polo provider and say client is this right here. So client. I believe if you do this, everything is set and okay. Refresh. It's not complaining at all. Now, okay, right, but if you try to actually make a query, make a request, whether that's a query or a mutation, at that point it will complain because right now my server is not running. So let's make sure that the actual localhost 4000/GraphQL is running, is up and running. Now it is. Fantastic. We can also just forcefully save this, Command S to compile it again. Everything seems fantastic. It's running as intended. So go back over here. The next thing that we're going to do is create a query. How do you create or how do you send query requests to your GraphQL API? And if you're using the Apollo client, which we are, the way you do it is through query components. So for this, I'm actually going to have it inside my users component. Do that, and let's take a look at what the way it works. So this is what you're going to do. Right? You're actually going to write out the query itself, and then add that query into the Apollo client's query component as a query. And inside that query component, it provides you with a few things: loading, error, and data. And we'll see how that works. Let's first actually try creating that query. So go back over here. I'm going to say const get users equals GraphQL, and there are a few options. Auto import from GraphQL tag. I'm pretty sure. No, okay, that's all we have. That's great. And these are backticks. If you don't know where backticks are, it's right left of your keypad above 1. It's right left to it. Backticks. And we're going to say basically copy paste what we have over here. Right? We know that we use this. Let's say just remove that and try it again just so that we know that it works. Let's say we only want email, right? And send it over. Fantastic. Just copy this and paste it over here. Okay. And the next thing that you need to do is add the query component. So what I'm going to do here is say query, cool, and inside here say query equals the thing that we just defined. We want to basically, we're going to say, okay, and inside here, return this, right? If we do this, it should work as is. Oh, and let's just change the name to users as well. Save that. It should work. Refresh this. Users, cool. Nothing's happening right here. But as you can see from the documentation, it provides us with loading, error, and data. So let's just take a look at what that looks like. Loading, error, and data. And in fact, instead of doing that, let's make it so that it returns this so that we can console log some of that. And do this, do that, and we're going to console log is loading, and also console log error if it exists, and we're going to console log data. Now, a few things that you'll notice here is that how many times this actually gets loaded. So you'll notice that it says is loading true, undefined for error, and data is an empty object. And then it runs again and it says is loading is false, there's no error, and then at that point get users indeed have the data that we want. So what's happening over here is that this query component will send off that query request to our GraphQL API server, which knows how to do so through this. But the way that React works is it has to render something, right? So it will render whatever is being returned here, but with these things, loading, error, and data being whatever it is at that very moment. So the very first time it renders, loading will be true, likely error will be undefined, and data is going to be an object but empty. And then when it actually receives the response, at that point it'll re-render, and which loading should be false. And if we did get a valid response with no error, error is still undefined, and data will have the data that we want. So you can see that in action right here. So one cute little thing that we can do here is say something along the lines of, let's do something like this. Right? So if loading is true, we will send back something that says loading. Maybe that's too obnoxious. Loading, something like that. If loading is not true, then we just send back, or we render null, right? So if we do this, you saw that, right? For a split second, you can see that it says loading and it goes away. So that's pretty useful. And let's see what error would look like if it actually does error out. So for instance, if we were to kill our server here and then refresh this, there we go. Now it has an error. And this is actually coming from users.js.18, which is exactly right here. So hopefully through this you can both understand how to use a Polo client, but also kind of get a sense of why it's pretty useful. It comes with a lot of things that you can use right out of the box. That's quite helpful. Okay, we're gonna run our server again, and okay, that's pretty cool. Now, what can we do next? We could make it so that it shows, let's say, if data exists, right? Render a div. If not, render null. And when data does exist, we're going to say data dot, I believe the way that it looks like is, well, let's remove this for 1 second so that we understand, we know how it looks like. It's going to be data.getUsers, and then grab one of them inside that array. So data, it's get user, that's not right, get users, and then map it. Each user will have a user ID. So we're going to make sure that we provide React with a key. It's going to be user.id, I believe. And right here, we can just say something along the lines of, what are we getting? We're asking for email, right? Okay. Email is user.email. Oh, we're not asking for ID, are we? Okay, we should change that. So ID. Okay, so we save that. Go over here. Expected an assignment or function call insists on expression where what did I do wrong? Oh. Okay. Yep. Data.getUsers is undefined. But, oh, we need to say data.getUsers if that exists. Because even when we don't have, even when we have sent the request and haven't gotten the response back, this data right here is defined. It's not undefined. It is defined as an empty object. So we need to say get users, and there we go. It works. And to show you one more thing here, how or why Apollo client is pretty great. Apollo client actually does a lot of the caching for us. It basically caches most of the requests being sent and the responses being sent back. To actually see what I mean by that is, it may be difficult to see right now. If I refresh, so I haven't visited users yet. So I haven't visited the user's route from my React router. Hence, I haven't sent the get users query yet. So I don't have any data that I received from my server. So when I click on that, it takes a split second to actually send the request and get the response back, and then use that data to render what I want to render. Right? But once I have done that, and afterwards, when I go back and forth, I don't need to do that. Apollo client will cache the response, and when it does have a cache response, it will not send another request, right? If we want to see this actually a lot more obviously, what we can do is just purposefully make the request slow. Just write a quick function that will delay things. Save that just to show you what will happen here. So basically all this is a function that will basically delay by how many milliseconds. Actually, let's make it 3 seconds instead of 300 milliseconds. Now, if I do this, what will happen here, let's see it from here first. It's hard to see that, right? So, get users, and let's just say ID. It's going to take 3 seconds and then give us back our data, right? So going back over to our React application, let's refresh it and visit our users route. It's going to load for 3 seconds, waiting for the response, and then populate the data, right? And render that data. But once we've done that, from there, it's instant because we're not actually sending any request. Apollo client has cached the response, and we're using that instead. Okay, cool. I think that's about it for this video. Yeah, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.